Hi guys, welcome back. In this session, let's discuss a new chapter, that is your body fluids and circulation. This chapter is one of the important chapters, I would say, because you don't have to spend so much of time memorizing concepts, understanding concepts. All the questions that are asked are straightforward, and if you have read NCERT from top to bottom and understood all the concepts, and the answers will be so simple, and most of the options will be direct when it comes to MCQs. And that is something so nice to happen in a competitive exam, right? So yes. So without any further delay, let's get into the chapter. First, let's take a quick look at the things that we'll be learning this module. Okay. So generally, you must have a basic idea. Why do we need something called circulatory system, and how specialized the human circulatory systems are? Okay. So I shall start with some very basic concept. That is, let's take a cell over here. Okay. So this is our cell, and humans have this eukaryotic cell, right? Okay. Eukaryotic means you have a well-defined nucleus. Okay. So here is our mitochondria, and other organelles I'm not going to write here. What I'm going to say here is this. All the energy are rich sources like glucose. You take something like fatty acids. Okay. And then you have your proteins. Okay. So all these things, these nutrients are the product from digestion. Okay. So what happens is these comes to the cell and they undergo some catabolic process, especially. Okay. So after undergoing certain catabolic process, what happens? They'll be donating some. They'll be forming ATP, right? Here, what happens is system. So if you see here, you will be having the production of ATP. Okay, that is taking place in the mitochondria. Just a rough idea here. So here you see these are chemical reactions that are taking place inside the cell is what we call as metabolic reactions. Okay, and at the end, the main thing is ATP formation along with the liberation or the release of metabolic waste. Okay, so in terms of when it comes to any carbohydrate metabolism, the end product will be a carbon dioxide and water, and then you can have urea formation, uric acid, everything are taking place in liver. And then when it comes to fatty acids, just goes for the circulation thing. Okay, so yeah, these are some of the metabolic ways that I am now pointing out here, right? So what happens if these metabolic products accumulate in our body? Over the period of time, they are going to be acting like a toxins, right? So what must happen? These there must be a regulatory system that must be excreting these toxins out of the body. Okay. So what are the ways by which we can eliminate these toxic metabolites? We can just eliminate the main thing is either it is through urination, right? So through urine or feces, right? So these are the major way, okay, through which we are eliminating our metabolic waste. Okay. So now we see here for this toxins. Okay, you see this urea is as I told earlier, this urea is produced in the liver. Okay, and for this urea from liver, for it to reach the kidney, because urination, the main organ is nothing but your kidney, right? Okay, for this toxic urea from liver, for it to reach the kidney, how it is going to get transported? That is a very good question, right? Okay, and who is going to help in this transport thing? Okay, so yes, so here comes the key player of our chapter, that is our blood. Okay, so what exactly blood is doing? Blood not only transport this metabolic waste from one organ to another organ. Okay, what it also does, it also helps in transport of oxygen. Yes, it also helps in the transport of oxygen. So I shall give you some list of things that blood does. Okay, you see, it does transport oxygen. So where is oxygen coming from? It is from lungs, right? When we inhale fresh air, it is oxygen-rich air. Okay, so literally it is going to deliver oxygen. After this, no oxygen gets dissolved in the blood. Okay, that's when you get oxygenated blood. So what happens is literally almost all the tissues in our body requires this oxygen, right? Okay, because this process that is taking place inside the mitochondria is nothing but oxidative catabolism. The catabolism is kind of an oxidation process there. Okay, taking place in, and then you see once it's going to deliver oxygen to the tissues, and then nutrients essentially. Okay, these nutrients are absorbed in the gut, that is your intestine. Okay, from intestine, these nutrients are going to be carried to various cells of our body, because all the cells requires energy, right, to perform its function. So yes, for the cells to survive, it requires energy. And where is that energy coming from? Just by just from these nutrients. Okay, and then you can have the removal of metabolic waste. The metabolic waste are produced by each cell, which will be carried via the blood to the kidney. Okay, and then you have hormones, especially. You see, hormones, they are actually secreted by your endocrine glands. From endocrine glands, they are going to reach the target cells or target organs, okay, where it is going to exert its physiological function. Okay, so all these things, okay, all these physiological activities are performed by blood. Okay, so this is the reason, you see, you might have got this idea, right? What is that? Blood is that kind of tissue that is connecting various organs functionally, and that is the reason why we consider blood as connective tissue. Okay, what is this? This is our connective tissue. That is good. But if you see in NCERT, they have mentioned something called special connective tissue. What is that? Special connective tissue. What is the meaning for this? What makes it special? What makes blood a special connective tissue? You need to understand. Okay, let's see this NCERT text here. You see, blood is a special connective tissue consisting of fluid matrix, plasma, and formed elements. Okay. Now we see here. Let's understand what makes blood a special connective tissue. Basically, just for you to know, any connective tissue, okay, it should be it connects, it just supports, and it transports various substances across the body. Okay, so blood also connects with, as per our example, if you have seen that, blood also connects various organs. Okay, functionally by transporting oxygen, nutrients, hormones, and removal of metabolic waste. Okay, so all the cells in the connective tissue are embedded in a matrix. Okay, all the cells are embedded in a matrix. It is true for all the connective tissue. Okay, unlike our solid connective tissues like bone, your cartilages. Okay, in our blood, this matrix is not solid. This matrix is fluid in nature. Okay, this is fluid in nature. And what are those cells? These cells are nothing but the formed elements. These are our formed elements. They are nothing but our RBC. We have red blood cell, we have white blood cell, and we have platelets. Okay. And what is this fluid matrix? This fluid matrix is what we call as plasma. Okay. So now we got the idea what makes blood a special connective tissue. That is the fact the matrix is fluid in nature, and that fluid matrix is what we call as plasma. Okay. So now let's discuss all these formed elements one by one. Before that, let's discuss some little important points about this plasma. Okay. And what we have got here is the NCERT text about the plasma. Okay. So plasma is a straw-colored viscous fluid. Okay. What is straw-colored? Here I have attached an image, right? So you see, this is our plasma, and this is the exact color. Okay, straw-colored, right? And just for you to know, whenever you're collecting a blood sample, okay, you're not going to have these visible layers that are separated just like this. That means what I'm saying is you won't be having a plasma in a separate layer that's forming a different layer, and WBC is forming a different layer, and red blood cells forming a different layer. Okay, blood as a whole is a homogeneous mixture. Okay, under normal conditions, right? That means all the formed elements are dispersed uniformly. Okay, and how did we obtain this kind of layered appearance? It is through the process called centrifugation. Okay, let's spend some 30 seconds to 1 minute. Okay, understanding what is a centrifugation, right? So centrifugation is a process by which you are going to separate the blood components, especially blood components based on the differences in their density. Okay, some people call it as sedimentation rate. That is no exact way to say, but no, for easy understanding, I would say it as density differences. Okay, because not all the formed elements, that is your WBCs, RBCs, and your thrombocytes, that is the platelets, they are not going to have the same density. Of course, they have different sizes and different volume, which is going to alter the density, right? So what happens is when you're when you're just subjecting this into the centrifugation machine and allow it to spin at high speeds, okay, high rotational speeds like 3000 to 500 RPM, what happens is as a centrifugal force acts outwards, the molecules that are having, the compounds that are having higher densities are going to be depositing at the bottommost position. Okay, and since RBCs are having the higher are having higher density, they are going to deposit at the bottommost position. Okay, and that is why you're having RBC, and here you have some Buffy code kind of thing, that is your WBCs. Okay, now they're just now having a small Buffy code over there. On top of that, you have plasma. Okay, observe this diagram. You can notice one small detail here. Okay, that is out of 100% of blood. Okay, out of 100% of blood, you see this plasma almost, okay, constitutes 55% of it. Okay, and the remaining 45% is constituted by these formed elements, right? And then even in that 45%, now who is holding most of the part? Who is occupying most of the volume? That is our RBC. Okay, and then the very least is our WBCs. Okay, this is an important. This is one of the important details you should. Okay, right. So you see the plasma. In this plasma, whatever volume of plasma I have, 90 to 92% of plasma is made up of water. Okay, water, they are just universal solvent, right? They are going to act as a solvent. Okay, in which solutes are going to be mixed, right? So the remaining 8%, 8 to 10% are going to be your organic compounds, electrolytes, and other nutrients, as we have discussed. Okay, so yes, so that is the constituent of plasma. So now let's see the things that are given in NCERT. So you see, it is a viscous fluid, and viscous means it is with respect to water. Okay, actually it is 4 to 5 times viscous. Our plasma is. Okay, and very important thing, what is responsible? You know, you have these 3 proteins here that are the major proteins in our plasma. And one detail I would like to add here is fibrinogen is the protein, plasma protein, that is responsible for this viscosity. Okay, so yes. And you have multiple reasons why fibrinogen is the reason for this viscosity. I shall discuss it one by one. Okay, now we see here, it is constituting nearly 55% of the blood. Okay, and then 92% of plasma is water, and proteins contribute 6 to 8% of it, right? Now let's discuss about the plasma proteins. You can have we have a number of plasma proteins. Okay, many proteins are dissolved in our plasma, but for exam's sake, we have 3 important proteins, and you should know what are those 3 proteins and what are the functions of these 3 proteins. They can be asked in MCQ format, and they'll be asked in match the following kind of thing, right? Okay, so yes, so you see the first protein that I'm going to discuss is about fibrinogen. Okay, the very basic detail I would like to add here is, whenever you're having this gen that is added to the suffix, you should understand that this protein is in inactive form. Okay, this protein is in inactive form. Okay, right. What is the function of this protein? This protein is one of the clotting factors. Okay, this is one of the clotting factors. What does clotting refers to? Okay, let's get to the basic here. Let's say this is my blood vessel, right? Any cut or any trauma due to which there is a breakage in the continuity of this blood vessel, what happens? The blood starts to oozes out, right? Okay, and that process is what we call as bleeding. What happens if bleeding occurs excessively? Of course, you will be having a low BP, no hypotension, and if more volume of blood is lost automatically, right? So that is something we don't want to happen. So what happens? Our body has evolved a regulatory mechanism that is going to counteract this bleeding, right? And that is what we call as coagulation or clotting. Okay, so coagulation is that process that is going to prevent bleeding. Okay, so how does it now? What happens and how does it occur here? You see, our blood has several factors that are involved in clotting. And those factors, almost there are 13 factors that are involved in this coagulation pathway. And those factors are what we call as clotting factors. So what happens is, these clotting factors arrives to the site of tissue injury, and then they comes and seals this vessel wall, thereby preventing further bleeding and further blood loss. Okay, right. So you see, normally this fibrinogen, as I said earlier, it is in inactive form. Okay, for this fibrinogen to get converted into an active form, okay, we need several clotting factors. Okay, cascade of event, a series of events that is going to take place, through which this fibrinogen will get activated and form a clot, and that is what we call as fibrin. Okay, right. So this step involves several events. Okay, so cascade of events that are going to take place there. Okay, right? Normally, the fibrinogen should be in inactive form because we don't want clots to be formed inside the blood vessel, right? Of course, what happens if a lot of clots get formed inside the blood vessel, right? Just have this idea. Normally, this vessel lumen should have enough space for the blood to flow, right? So what happens if there's no lot of clotting factors just accumulates and forms some clots? An important clotting factor is your fibrinogen. Okay, it is clotting factor 1. Okay, when this lumen is getting occluded by this clot, okay, clot formation, what happens? You'll be having something called turbulent blood flow, right? That is going to create some turbulence. That is going to add some shear force to the blood vessels. Inevitably, they are going to damage the vessel wall. Okay, right? What happens if more of this clot formation takes place? Okay, right? That means the vessel is completely occluded, right? Now you see, let's say we are having any other organs, okay? Let's say we are having our heart here. What happens to the heart? The heart is not going to get its kind of blood supply. The heart cells that are the myocytes, they are going to die. And this is what we call as myocardial infarction. And we don't want that to happen, right? Especially our body doesn't allow it to happen, okay? For that sake, it keeps the fibrinogen in its inactive form, okay? You should understand this basic thing. Now we are moving on to our second plasma protein, that is our albumin. Okay. So what is the role of this albumin? Okay. In one simple term, you want me to say, I would say this albumin maintains osmotic pressure. Okay. Let's now understand how it is going to maintain the osmotic pressure. What exactly is this osmotic pressure? Okay. Right. For the thing, you need to know the basic thing about our intravascular compartment. Okay. So now you see here, these are the lining endothelial cells of our blood vessels. Okay. Right. Now I'm going to add some two important terms. This is not important for example, say, but for understanding, for the sake of understanding, it is important. Okay. You have something called as crystalloids. And you have another thing called as colloids. Okay. Your plasma proteins are colloid in nature. They are colloids, our plasma proteins, right? And you have some other compounds like metabolic waste like urea, okay? And you have several electrolytes like sodium or stuff like that, right? So these things comes under this crystalloids. So both these things are going to be present in a plasma, right? And having now come to this crystalloid part, but now we are discussing about this plasma proteins, right? You see, both these crystalloids and colloids are going to maintain the osmotic pressure. Okay, what is this osmotic pressure? Basically, these two compounds are there, right? They can attract water molecules. Okay, they can attract water molecules, right? So, very important concept you need to understand is osmolarity is directly proportional to the number of solutes. 90 to 92% of your plasma is made up of water, right? That is your solvent, and the remaining 8%, right? So in that you see, the more number of solutes that are present, especially albumins, okay, the more will be the osmolarity. Okay, what does osmolarity refers to? The ability to attract water within themselves, right? Okay, so what happens? This space is what you call as intravascular space. Okay, let me write it. This is your intravascular. Language is very simple, right? You see, intra means that is within, vascular means vessel, within vessel. Okay, this is our intravascular space, and outside the vessel, simple, we call it as extravascular space. Okay, this is our extravascular space and our intravascular space. Okay, right? So what these colloids and crystalloids does, they ensure that most of the water molecule stays within the blood vessel. Okay, right? So you see here, this is due to the fact that these endothelial cells, that the lining endothelial cells on this vessel wall, they are selectively permeable. They can allow the flow of water molecule. Okay, they can just water molecule can go to and fro motion kind of thing here. Okay, they can just either go outside or come inside. Okay, and what is going to determine the direction of flow of this water molecule? That is the concentration of these crystalloids and colloids. Okay, so if the concentration is higher, you know that, right? Water always moves from lower concentration to higher concentration, right? So if the concentration of colloids is higher here, what happens? Water enters into the blood vessel. Yeah, yes, water enters into the blood vessel. What happens if the colloidal concentration is decreased or diminished? Obviously, the water is going to move into the extravascular space, right? And this is what we call as osmotic pressure, right? And this osmotic pressure is mainly contributed by our albumin, which is the plasma protein. And why only albumin? You can ask, why not fibrinogen? The reason is albumin constitutes almost like 60% of plasma protein. It is the most abundant plasma protein, and it is smaller in size, and it is, as I said earlier, osmolarity depends on the number of solids, right? So since it is a higher in number, albumin constitutes to the osmolarity, and it maintains the osmotic pressure. Okay, I hope this is clear. And now the third important plasma protein is our globulins. Okay, important thing, some basic right, you need to know is globulin, which means they are spherical in shape. Okay, and what are the types of globulins we have? We have alpha globulin, beta globulin, and then we have our gamma globulin. Okay, so this gamma globulin plays an important role in our immunoglobulins. Okay, what are those immunoglobulins? These immunoglobulins are the antibodies. These are the antibodies, and who is going to produce this? These are produced by our plasma B cell. Okay, plasma B cell. Okay, so how plasma B cell produce this? Whenever any foreign antigen is recognized by our immune system, it is going to signal our B cell to differentiate into a specialized form of antibody producing plasma B cell. Okay, right. And you see, what are these alpha and beta globulins? No, not much detail is given here, but you see in NCERT. Okay, if you see here, these are mostly involved in transport, right? They are mostly involved in transport of various substances. For example, you have your thyroid hormones. Of course, thyroid hormones, they cannot blend in with the water, right? Obviously, they need a transport protein that is called as thyroid hormone binding globulins. And you have your steroidal hormones like testosterone, estrogen, and even they are invisible liquids, right? They cannot mix well with water. So what happens? You have something called sex hormone binding globulins, and you have some ceruloplasmin, transferrin. Now some they are ionic in nature. Okay, so for in order to transport these things, these two globulins come into the effect. Okay, so this is all about our three major plasma proteins. Okay, let me revise it once again. We have our plasma protein. The first one is your fibrinogen, and the second one is albumin, and the third one is globulin. So what is the role of fibrinogen? Fibrinogen is a clotting factor, and it is going to be helpful in sealing the breakage in the vessel wall. Okay, and you have your albumin. This albumin maintains the osmotic pressure. Okay, and you have your globulins, which are having immune function as well as the transport function. Okay, so yes, I hope these things are clear. And plasma almost constitutes 55% of blood volume. Okay, now let's see what are the things given in NCERT. Here you see fibrinogens are needed for clotting, coagulation of blood. Globulins are primarily involved in defense mechanisms of the body. Okay, and albumins helps in osmotic balance. Okay, so you see plasma also contains small amounts of minerals. Okay, so you have sodium, calcium, magnesium, and your bicarbonates, and then you have chloride ions. Okay, and etc. You see here, what are the use of these? What are the roles of these minerals? Okay, you don't have to memorize those minerals. It's not even necessary. Actually, they help when you have this bicarbonate that is going to be acting like a buffer, or they maintain pH. Okay, they maintain pH, and then you have your sodium, calcium, magnesium, right? So you have your sodium, calcium, magnesium. All these things are going to be helpful in your chlorides. Okay, all these things are going to be helpful in maintaining the membrane potential, right? They are going to be governing the membrane potential. Along with that, they are also, as I mentioned earlier, the crystalloids, they are going to maintain to some extent osmolarity. Okay, they are going to maintain the osmolarity. Okay, right. And then the final part, 6 to 8% is protein. There may be something like 0.1 to 1% kind of thing, right? So what it is constituted by? These are constituted by our glucose, amino acids, and lipids. And where are we getting this from? These are the absorbed nutrients. Okay, they are also present as they are always in transit in the body. Okay, and that is what they have given here, right? So that means they are constantly mobilized, right? Whenever any tissues requires energy, yeah, these are metabolic source of energy will be mobilized to various tissues, right? And we have one important question that is generally asked. That is, what is the difference between serum and the plasma, right? So let's understand that part. So you see here, let's say this is my plasma. Okay, So let's say this is my plasma. What plasma is made up of? Plasma is made up of fibrinogen. It is made up of your albumin. It is made up of your globulin, and it is also made up of certain electrolytes. Okay, and we have glucose and certain nutrients, right? So all these things it is made up of, right? What exactly is your serum? So here understand this Venn diagram, right? What happens here, right? Oh, just a minute. So yes. So as you can see here, except fibrinogen, that is a clotting, not only fibrinogen, except all the clotting factors. I have not mentioned the other clotting factors, but except all the clotting factors, if you remove, you take a plasma sample and remove all the clotting factors and the remaining liquid that you have, okay, the remaining solution that you have, because you're having solvent as well as the solute, right? And the remaining solution that you have is the serum, okay? Yes. So this is all about our plasma.